The sky was cloudless, and the sea looked like a mirror, reflecting the vast blue above. Everything was so calm, it was almost unsettling. Lucas was alone on his small sailboat, miles away from any shore. The engine emitted a low hum, and the sound of the waves against the hull was his only constant companion. He had been sailing for weeks, with only the vastness of the ocean to occupy him. All he wanted was some time away from the world, from the noise, from expectations. Perhaps to find a bit of peace. But that feeling of calm was beginning to weigh on him. Lucas wasn't the kind of person who was easily intimidated. A seasoned traveler, he had faced storms that nearly destroyed boats, and spent nights lost under starless skies. But there was something different about this journey. Something he couldn't name, yet it throbbed in the back of his mind. That morning, as he adjusted his route on the GPS, he noticed something strange. A point on the map automatically marked that he was sure he hadn't placed there. It was a spot lost in the middle of the ocean, nameless, with no indication of land or anything significant, a point without context, like a fly on a blank page. Curious, he decided to change course. After all, what else could he do? He had enough food and water for a few more days. There was no rush to return. Following that point on the map felt right, as if it were a silent invitation, impossible to refuse. As he got closer, things began to change. The engine sputtered for a few seconds, and then resumed as if nothing had happened. The wind stopped abruptly, and the sea, which had been gently dancing, became still. It was as if the ocean was holding its breath. Then he saw it floating adrift. A small fishing boat. But that wasn't what made his heart race. On the side, in faded letters, the name Helena Lucas froze. That name wasn't a coincidence. It was the same as his father's boat, which had disappeared at sea 20 years ago. Lucas's heart seemed to beat out of rhythm, racing as if it wanted to escape his chest. He squinted, trying to make sure he wasn't seeing things. Helena. Yes, that was it. The faded letters seemed like a whisper from the past, a memory returning to haunt him. Gripping the helm tightly, he adjusted the course to approach the small boat. The Helena looked as though it had been swallowed and spat out by time. The wood was weathered, the ropes nearly rotted, and rust stains covered the hull like scars. Yet there it was probably floating on the endless sea. This doesn't make sense, he murmured to himself, unable to shake the feeling that this was more than a coincidence. 20 years ago, his father, Carlos, had gone out fishing on the Helena and never returned. The search lasted weeks, but all they found was a piece of the broken mast, and now the boat was right there before him. He cut the engine and let the sailboat drift until it was alongside the small vessel. Carefully he jumped aboard, the hull creaking under his weight. The air there felt different, heavier, almost suffocating. Lucas took a deep breath and began his inspection. On the deck he found familiar objects. An old rusty hook, the remnants of a fishing net, and a life jacket he immediately recognized. It was as if time had frozen. He opened the small door leading to the cabin, but the darkness inside was nearly impenetrable. He grabbed a flashlight and shone it into the interior. Papers were scattered across the floor. Dented cans lay around, and the backpack was tossed in a corner. It was his father's backpack, he was sure of it. The same one Carlos always took to sea, filled with what he deemed essential. A compass, a pocket knife, a notebook. Lucas picked up the backpack and opened it cautiously. Inside, the smell of salt water mixed with something older, mustia. He found the notebook, the same one he used to flip through as a child. The pages were stained, but still legible. and that's when he saw the message written in shaky, hurried handwriting, if scrawled in a final moment. If you're reading this, it means you found the boat. Don't trust what seems obvious. Nothing here is what it seems. A shiver ran down Lucas's spine. The words felt so alive, as if they were a direct command from his father. But what did they mean? Lucas sat on the deck of the Helena, his hands trembling as he held the notebook. Those hastily scribbled words, like a muffled cry lost in time, carried a weight he couldn't ignore. Nothing here is what it seems. He repeated the phrase, trying to unravel its meaning. The sun was already starting to dip in the sky, painting everything in golden and orange hues. The sea stretched endlessly, like an infinite carpet has, yet it felt suffocating at the same time. It was as if he were in a bubble, isolated from everything and everyone. Determined not to let doubts take over, Lucas began to search the boat. He found a few familiar items, a broken watch, his father's favorite cap, even a mug with a chip on the rim. But nothing else seemed relevant, just remnants of what once had been a life. He returned to the notebook and flipped through the pages. Most were filled with fishing notes, coordinates and diagrams of maritime knots. All ordinary until one page caught his attention. Among scribbled numbers something stood out. A drawing, it was a strange symbol resembling a circle, intersected by curved lines like a map, but without labels or explanations. Beside it another brief phrase, "This is the key." Lucas looked at the symbol, then at the horizon. The key to what he wondered aloud. Acting on instinct, he grabbed the GPS and compared the coordinates, automatically marked by the device, with the notes in the notebook. It didn't take long to realize they matched perfectly. This revelation made everything even more confusing. How could his father's boat be connected to a point in the middle of the ocean, marked on his GPS without explanation? It was as if he had been drawn there by something greater, something beyond reason. Suddenly a metallic sound echoed, shattering the silence. Lucas turned quickly, his heart pounding. The sound came from the hull of the Helena, as if something had struck beneath the water. He leaned over the edge trying to see, but all he saw was his own reflection in the still sea. Then he noticed the compass on the sailboat's panel was spinning wildly. The needle seemed to have lost its mind, pointing in every direction at once. A wild idea took hold of him. What if his father had discovered something the sea wanted to keep hidden, something that wasn't meant to be found? Lucas took a deep breath. He knew he had two choices: leave immediately, or follow the GPS point to uncover where it might lead. He chose the latter. Lucas took the helm of the sailboat, his eyes fixed on the point marked on the GPS. Every meter forward seemed to increase the weight of the atmosphere around him. It was as if the sea was alive, watching, waiting. The sound of the waves was now almost non-existent. Everything seemed still, except for the hum of the engine and the soft noise of the hull, slicing through the water. He checked the compass again, but the needle kept spinning, defying logic. Something inside him whispered that, with every passing second, he was approaching something that would change everything. After about an hour of navigating, he spotted something on the horizon, a faint glimmer, almost like a reflection, but one that made no sense under the clear sky and empty sea. As he drew closer, he realized it was a structure. It resembled a floating platform, but looked unlike anything he had ever encountered on his travels. The structure was made of corroded metal, parts of it covered in algae and rust. It was large, though not monumental, as if it had been abandoned for decades. Lucas turned off the engine and let the sailboat drift until it gently bumped against the platform. He tied a rope to what seemed to be a rusted access ladder and climbed up, his heart pounding. At the top, the air felt heavier, almost oppressive. The place was a blend of scrap and mystery, broken panels, pipes leading nowhere, and markings on the walls that seemed to be numbers or codes faded with time. Lucas moved carefully, his footsteps echoing in the void. At the center of the platform, he found what appeared to be an entrance. A metal door, slightly ajar with scratch marks around it. He hesitated for a moment, but curiosity overcame fear. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was dark, but his flashlight revealed a small compartment. In the center, there was a metal table with scattered papers. Lucas began examining the documents, but they were written in a language he didn't recognize. The pages bore the same symbol he had seen in his father's notebook. There was something else, a recorder. He picked it up and pressed the play button. A static-filled sound filled the air before a man's voice emerged. "If you found this, it means you've come too far. Leave now, don't look back." Lucas's blood ran cold. The voice wasn't his father's. Suddenly a noise echoed from outside. A metallic sound, like something had fallen or been moved. He turned quickly, the flashlight trembling in his hand. "Who's there?" he called, but the only response was silence. Lucas knew he had to decide quickly. Stay and investigate further, or return to the sailboat and leave. But part of him, that stubborn and determined part, needed answers. He grabbed the papers in the recorder and returned to the deck. The engine's roar seemed louder than ever as he began to move away from the structure. But something in the air told him this wasn't over yet. Lucas sailed in silence, his gaze fixed on the horizon, but his mind remained anchored to the platform. That abandoned structure, the cryptic papers, and the recorder with the threatening message, left him with one certainty. His father knew he was getting involved in something far greater. He spread the papers on the navigation table and compared them with the notes in his father's notebook. Although he couldn't understand the language of the documents, clear patterns emerged, charts, coordinates in the same symbol repeated on every page. There was no doubt. The platform was part of something bigger, something operating in the shadows, away from the world's eyes. Among the notebook's pages, he found an old newspaper clipping. The headline stood out. "Fisherman disappears after reporting suspicious activity at sea." The name mentioned Joaquim Amaro sounded familiar. Lucas recalled hearing his father talk about him, but never knew Joaquim had vanished. In the article, Joaquim described boats disappearing and strange signals on the radar. It sounded like delirium, but now it made sense. Lucas began piecing the puzzle together. Carlos's father and other local fishermen had stumbled upon something they were never meant to discover. As night fell, Lucas spotted a faint light blinking on the horizon. He adjusted his course to approach and found a small boat drifting aimlessly. Inside he saw something unexpected. A metal box with its lid slightly open. Carefully he opened the box and found a bundle of papers and a cassette tape. In the documents the answer finally became clear. His father had uncovered an illegal operation involving the disposal of chemical waste by a large corporation. The platform's coordinates and the marked point on the GPS identified areas used to dump toxic substances into the ocean far from any oversight. Carlos and other fishermen had gathered evidence, but before they could present it to the authorities, they began to be hunted. Joaquim disappeared, and Carlos realized he was also in danger. That was when he made the decision to abandon the boat, to save himself and his family, scattering clues so that one day the truth could come to light. The cassette tape, when played, confirmed everything. It was Carlos's voice. "Son, if you're hearing this, it means you've gotten to where I couldn't. I did what was necessary to protect you and your mother. Now it's your turn to decide what to do with what you found. But remember, the truth can be a burden, but it's also the only path to justice." Lucas stood still for a moment, absorbing the words. Finally, everything made sense. His father's disappearance wasn't an accident. It was a sacrifice. With the documents and evidence in hand, Lucas knew what he had to do. He returned to the sailboat, set course for the mainland, and felt a mix of sadness and resolve. The mystery the ocean had hidden for so long was unraveled, and he was ready to honor his father's legacy, even if it meant facing powerful forces. As the sailboat cut through the waves toward the coast, one thing became clear. Carlos had never stopped fighting, even in the silence of the sea. Now it was Lucas's turn to continue what he had started.